how much of this do you think is in the world of people controlling other people and utilizing these things? How much of a long-term plan do you think is premeditated, or do you think this is a slippery slope that we're all just walking down, or do you think there is an execution here of a plan?
Well, I look at that in the book as well, The Technological Elixir, and I talk about it a lot on my radio show. And since I'm open to looking at so many avenues and not trying to really prove a point, I think that we can look at this as a very, very wide-ranging spectrum, where on one end you just have college kids, like there are some college kids in Canada. I think they were in, I want to say Toronto, or I think somewhere around that area of Canada, and they developed a system by which they could listen to your voice, and then they could mirror that voice, and then they could replay it back, but then they could use that as a way to create a voice that's your voice, but then to say anything. And these are just college kids who invented this. Same thing
Right.
at UC Berkeley. Some kids came up with neural dust, smart dust. You could just type that in UC Berkeley smart dust. It'll come up with a major university publication. So just some kids made that. But that stuff is also the kind of stuff that will be looked at by the military and by private companies, and they'll come in and buy it up, buy the rights to it, buy the patents, or they'll give these people a lot of money, and then they'll disappear into the woodwork of these, whether it's the military, defense contractors, corporations, whatever. So that's on one end of the spectrum. Just some kids who thought, like, I got a great idea. They're engineers. They develop something, makes them a lot of money. They get a great job, and then they're brought into that system. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people like Elon Musk. I thought it was interesting that Werner von Braun, the chief, basically the head who developed everything that NASA is today and was, Werner von Braun wrote a book called Project Mars, A Technical Tale. And he talked about going to Mars, there was like a colony of people on Mars, like aliens, and they were led by this being, if I remember this correctly, they were led by this being named Elon. And so from the book, you get this idea of beware of the Elon, because you couldn't trust Elon. Well, this is the Elon Musk who wants to go to Mars, and this is the Elon who wants to connect our brains and wants to literally put a net of satellites in the sky, a literal Skynet system with his Starlink program. And he comes off as like, I built a flamethrower. I've got this gothic girlfriend. I'm cool. I'm just like you. I sweat a lot. I'm really nervous on stage. I'm just a regular guy like you. And he probably is. But he's also made these comments like, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. So he clearly knows how dangerous it is. He knows that this is a double-edged sword, to say the very least. But like those people at MIT who have said, we know that this is dangerous, but we can't stop. We have to keep developing this. So I started to think maybe there's a more otherworldly force involved, kind of like the Borg from Star Trek, just as a reference point. And that there are perhaps entities or forces working through people like Elon Musk. And people like him and some of these other Silicon Valley people, there's no doubt that these guys, some of them probably already have microchips and wires in their brain. And if they don't have that, a lot of them, like I think it's Bezos, who's very well known for just taking handfuls of supplements and all these various experimental drugs and products to try to extend his life and life quality and things like that. It might have been Bezos, it might have been somebody else. So a lot of these guys, I think, on some hardcore drugs. And traditionally speaking, in the world of in the paranormal and in demonology, when people are taking a lot of drugs or they're drinking a lot of alcohol, that opens the door for what we call possession, what other people call walk-ins. So they become more susceptible to spiritual influences. And so I just talked about that in the book, that perhaps these people are under the influence of some demonic force, alien force, whatever you want to call it. And that's driving this forward. That's why people like Elon, they recognize the danger, but it's almost like they've got a gun to their head. Like the cops are called, the cops show up, the guy's got a gun behind the door, and the cop says, "Everything okay?" And you're like, yeah, everything's okay. And you're trying to, nudge your head to the left, showing he's got a gun behind the door. And it kind of feels like that from some of these guys. They get on stage, they're sweating, they just look burned out, or they look like their brains, everything's fried. And they're like, yeah, we built this. We gotta keep doing it. We have to keep building it. We don't know how to stop. It's like they're almost like they're being controlled. So I think the spectrum is as wide as some college kids to something that's other dimensional. And that's why this system is just like global, worldwide. And it seems to be just like in politics, when a policy is introduced or a bill is introduced in one state and it's passed and it sets a precedent, suddenly 6 other states have the same bill and then they pass it too. And I think that's very similar to what's happening in technology. It's like, well, we developed this. Some other people, it does have that, space race feel to it, that AI race, whoever can get there first. So it's about economics and money and building your portfolio and your company and your job. And that's part of the spectrum too. But I really think, to answer your question, it goes from the college kids to other dimensional entities, and perhaps the spectrum's even bigger and larger than that, anything I can imagine. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, in order for it to really be, it's automatically shortened by the nature of a human life. It's like, so if it is anything longer than that, it would have to be outside of humanity. Because, I don't know, historically, I guess people are looking to hand things off to their kids, but I don't know about in this situation.
Some of these people, they clearly, their desire is to materially live forever, right? And that's kind of where I got the idea for the name of the book, because throughout history, people have tried to do things to live longer, whether trying to make pacts with the devil, or they've tried to develop an elixir of life physically, not like spiritual alchemy, but a physical elixir of life. They find this thing, or Ponce de Leon, the fountain of youth. I think I mentioned that in the book too. They find this magical elixir to extend their life. And so I call it the technological elixir, because a lot of people are looking to technology to be that elixir of life, to extend their life. But I think one thing we miss is, even if like Elon Musk and these guys came out tomorrow and said, look, we've got technology, we can live for 500 years in a machine, no problem. Do you really think that people like you and I are going to have access to that? The cost alone of a Tesla car is beyond anything I could ever imagine in my lifetime affording.
You write about artificial intelligence, and, I think the reoccurring question that people really have, and, a lot of big names have chimed in on this. Some said we should fear artificial intelligence, and others have said that we don't have anything to worry about. Should we fear artificial intelligence?
I think a very healthy dose of fear to some degree is probably acceptable, because it allows us to be cautious and aware of the advancements of technology. But like anything, whether it's a gun, a hammer, a knife, it's really the intention of the wielder, the user, that determines what it's going to be used for. So when I have Elon Musk with his Neuralink system offering to sell basically microchips to the population, to put a Bluetooth device essentially on your ear, drill a hole into your skull, and then plug this thing into your brain tissue. And this is the same guy who has a plan with other companies like Boeing and Facebook and Google to launch with his SpaceX company satellites, tens of thousands of satellites, to create basically a 24-hour-a-day internet grid over the whole Earth. So that's called Starlink. And I start looking at things like that, and I think, well, this guy has major aspirations to connect all brains, then connect all, basically connecting all these satellites to create this internet system. I just start speculating and thinking, connect all the brains, then connect the brains to this, basically this net of satellites, a sky net of satellites, for basically create the creation of full spectrum dominance. I say basically because I really don't know what's going on. It just looks like, and it seems like, this is a very dangerous thing. But on the other side, we address this in the book, there are obviously beneficial elements to artificial intelligence. There are people that develop algorithms, and there are people that develop, like the people that develop the mathematics and the coding for just basic forms of AI assistance. And I don't think those people have some nefarious agenda. They want to enslave people. They want to hurt people. But that technology could then be used by bigger companies to do just that. I mean, look what we've seen with Google and with Amazon with their voice assistants. The Apple voice assistant Siri is a result of a military project called the Cognitive Assistant That Learns and Organizes, CALO, that was organized and produced, that was funded through the Department of Defense and through DARPA and all them. And so the question that I ask in the book, and I think other people could ask this question too, it's obvious, we're supposed to trust that billions of dollars were spent by the Defense Department and by multi-billion-dollar international corporations so that our lives are made easier by being able to search something with our voice. I just don't think that that's the motivation behind why they develop those things. So we look at all of that in the book, and that's what I do on my show, The Secret Teachings, too. I personally don't like the proliferation, which seems to be, for the most part, unchecked in terms of the development of AI. And we've seen MIT scientists say, we really don't know what we've created, but we're going to keep building it anyway, which seems kind of dangerous and irresponsible to me. But that's me. What do I know? So my perspective is, I don't like it. It seems very dangerous to me, and I don't see as much of a benefit to it. But there are some benefits, and objectively speaking, we need to acknowledge those and not look at this as a polarizing issue, in my view. It's either good or bad. I don't buy that.